Okay, picture this. Viking longships, right? Cutting through the waves, these bold explorers, warriors heading into the unknown, looking for new lands, new
Yeah,
resources.
it's a powerful image.
Right.
Conquering territory.
Exactly. Now, fast forward like 1,000 years, can a modern Scandinavian company take that same spirit, that same drive, and apply it to, well, maybe conquering a big piece of the future of European gold mining?
It's an interesting parallel, isn't it? That drive for resources, just obviously in a totally different context today. We're definitely looking at a company operating right there in Northern Europe, but focused, intensely underground.
Right. And the company we're diving into today is First Nordic Metals. Now, we've got this stack of source material you sent over: financials, news releases, articles, even analyst and investor commentary. It's quite a bit to dig through.
It is, and that's the goal here, right? These sources, they paint a really detailed picture. Our job is to sift through it together, pull out the key insights, the important stuff.
Figure out what it tells us about their strategy, their projects,
Mm.
plans, the finances.
The catalyst, yeah. And ultimately, if the arguments in these sources suggest it might be, well, undervalued maybe,
Yeah.
worth you taking a closer look.
It's about cutting through all the detail and finding the main story these documents tell us.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So, starting broadly, the sources introduce first Nordic Metals F&M. They're focused solely on gold exploration development in Scandinavia, Sweden, and Finland.
hmm And its origin, that's pretty recent, which is, I think, important context. F&M came together through a merger. It brought Barcel Minerals and Gold Line together. That deal only closed December 2023.
So, a pretty fresh combination. What's the core strategy, according to these sources, for this new company?
Well, the main idea seems to be consolidation and exploration, but on a really big scale.
Yeah.
In a specific, very prospective region. The big focus is the Gold Line Belt in Sweden.
But they have finished projects too.
They do, yeah, advancing those as well.
Yeah.
And a really crucial piece of this strategy, it's mentioned quite a bit, is leveraging the backing and the active involvement of a major mining partner.
That partner. Yeah, we'll get to them. Definitely a big name. But first, scale. You mentioned scale. Just how big is this land package we're talking about?
It's described as a genuinely district scale. The combined company holds permits covering over 104,000 hectares. That's spread across 41 permits, mostly contiguous,
Wow.
and it covers more than 100 kilometers of strike length along that key regional structure, the Gold Line Corridor.
100 kilometers. That sounds like they basically control a massive slice of geology there.
That's the idea. One source calls it one of the biggest license packages in Scandinavia, full stop. Another uses this striking comparison, an Agnico Eagle-sized land package, which really underlines the idea that F&M might control a whole region's potential, from an exploration standpoint.
And having that kind of scale, controlling a whole belt like that, it must allow for a different kind of exploration approach compared to just having scattered claims.
Oh, absolutely. It means you can be systematic across the whole trend.
Yeah.
You can follow mineralization, maybe find multiple deposits in the same system. That could create, real synergies down the line if they ever get to the development stage.
So within this huge area, the sources really zero in on one key asset, the Barsil project in Sweden. They call it the cornerstone, even the crown jewel.
Right. And that's where the strategic partner, Agnico Eagle Mines, comes in most directly. Barcel is a joint venture. F&M holds 45%, but Agnico Eagle holds the majority, 55%.
And Agnico's role is more than just being the majority owner, from what I read.
Oh, yeah, significantly more.
Mhm.
The JV agreement, it's detailed in the sources, says Agnico Eagle is funding all the expenditures on the project, sole funding, until they hit a specific milestone, earning an extra 15% interest by completing a pre-feasibility study, a PFS. That's a huge commitment from a major. The sources also really praise the quality of work Agnico is doing. Due diligence, planning, drilling, community stuff, metallurgy, geological understanding. They call it Agnico Eagle quality.
Having a major basically fund and run the work on your main asset, that seems like it massively de-risks things for a junior company, doesn't it? What is Agnico's willingness to do that tied to a PFS earn-in sort of signal about how they see Barcel?
Well, based on the sources, it strongly suggests Agnico sees serious potential there. They're not just, testing the waters. They're putting significant capital down to push this project to a key study phase. A PFS, that's a major step in de-risking a project technically and economically.
Right.
So their commitment to fund that whole process, it really underscores their belief in the project's size and, potential viability.
Speaking of size, what's the potential scale of Barcel based on the technical studies mentioned?
A current study reference points to a pretty significant resource already, 3 million ounces of gold, if you use a $1,700 gold price assumption. Still a hefty 2.4 million ounces at $1,300 gold. But crucially, the sources sound quite bullish on the upside.
More to find.
Yeah. They suggest further drilling could potentially grow Barsoul to like 3 to 5 million ounces, maybe even more. And as it stands, that resource makes it the second largest undeveloped gold project in Scandinavia.
And there's that interesting analogy they use about the type of mine it might become.
Yeah, the young Davidson type mine comparison. That's not just a casual remark. It implies Barsoul has the geology, the structure for a long life, bulk tonnage underground mine. The sources suggest it could be very profitable too.
So,
They talk about an expected all-in sustaining cost, AISC, maybe around $1,000 an ounce. They justify that by comparing Barsoul's underground grades, about 2.7 grams per ton, to a nearby underground mine that's apparently making money at lower grades, like 1.5 to 1.7 GPT. They even project a potential production profile, maybe 160,000 to 200,000 ounces a year.
those numbers, the costs and grades, they sound pretty good for an underground operation. And the location itself. Sounds like a plus.
Huge plus. The sources really emphasize the existing infrastructure: highway, railway, power lines, literally right next to the deposit. That cuts potential development costs massively compared to remote sites.
And power costs.
Super low. Hydropower, around 3 cents per kilowatt hour. That's a massive operating advantage for a mine. Plus, the sources mention pro-mining local communities and Sweden's very low corporate taxes.
Sweden's often called a top-tier mining place, right? Tier 1. But I thought I saw something interesting about it becoming more pro-mining. Is that right?
Yes, that was noted as a key point in one source. Unlike some other Western places where mining can face, more hurdles, Sweden is apparently becoming more welcoming to investment. They cite examples of other majors ramping up activity there.
Interesting.
There's even talk the area around Barsoul might have a national interest designation, which implies future mining shouldn't be blocked by other land uses.
That definitely strengthens the jurisdiction argument. And there's already been a lot of work done at Barsoul over the years, even before this merger.
For sure. Drilling since 2015 totals over 165,000 meters. The company's own reports mention specific results from 2022 and 2023 drilling, targeting different mineralization styles. And they detail ongoing work by Agnico people, sampling, geophysics getting ready for more drilling. The latest public technical report, the NI 43101, dates back to February 2019.
Okay, so Barsoul, cornerstone, Agnico backing, big resource, upside, great location, got it. But you said that huge land package is much bigger than just Barsoul. Let's switch gears. Orjärvi in Finland and the rest of that exploration ground.
Right. Orjärvi is another key piece. And the big thing here is First Nordic now owns 100% of this project.
How did they get 100% of Orjärvi?
That was part of the deal with Agnico Eagle, the one completed in July 2024. Agnico basically got FNM shares in exchange for some money owed and for transferring their interest in Orjärvi to FNM.
Okay. And before that?
Before that, FNM had acquired the Orjärvi reservation from a company called EMX back in January 2022. That earlier deal included a royalty for EMX, a 3% uncapped NSR on future production. FNM can buy down 1% of that royalty later, though, for a payment based on 2,500 ounces of gold, plus some annual advance payments.
Got it. And what's the potential described for Orjärvi? Is it as exciting as Barsoul?
Well, it's presented as very promising. One source even calls it potentially one of the best gold projects in Finland. It currently has a resource of 300,000 ounces gold equivalent.
Okay, 300,000 ounces.
But what's really emphasized is that resource came from pretty limited drilling, only about 17,000 meters. And critically, they've only drilled down to about 215 meters deep. So the sources suggest there's significant potential to expand that resource, especially going deeper. The technical report for that project, Kilmakongas within Orjärvi, is from July 2022.
So 300K ounces, but shallow drilling potential for more. I think I saw one source mention maybe spinning Orjärvi out eventually.
Yeah, that was floated as a possibility, a potential future scenario to maybe unlock its value separately from Barsoul and the Swedish portfolio.
Interesting idea. Okay, that brings us to the rest of that massive land package, the 100% owned ground along the Gold Line Belt, outside the main Barsoul resource. This is what they call the optionality.
Exactly. The sources frame it like this. It's the optionality, or even risk-free upside, if you believe FNM's current market cap is already covered or justified by the value of Barsoul alone.
Right.
Then any discoveries on this 100% owned ground become essentially extra value the market isn't recognizing yet.
That's a compelling way to frame it. What kind of early targets have they found on this optionality ground?
They highlight a couple of really interesting large soil anomalies in Sweden. Names are Harpsund and Nippes. What's interesting is the footprints are apparently larger than the soil anomaly over the main Barcel deposit. That suggests, potential for multi-million ounce finds.
Larger than Barcel's anomaly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's also specific excitement around the Ada discovery. That's within their Paulbecken project. Initial drilling there, just a few holes, hit some impressive high-grade gold.
High grade. Like what?
We're talking intercepts like 22.5 meters, grading 2.40 grams per ton gold, and another hole hit 14.55 meters at 2.44 grams per ton. And this was from just 6 holes, only 1,100 meters drilled total.
Wow. Not bad for early days.
And what one source points out, quite significantly I think, is that these early grades and widths, they look remarkably similar to the grades and widths from the very first discovery holes drilled at Barcel itself, way back when. That comparison definitely makes you pay attention.
Yeah, that parallel makes AIDA sound like a top priority. Any recent news on exploration on this 100% owned ground?
Yes. Recent updates mentioned in the sources. Regional till sampling results at the Storjuktan project confirmed 5 new large kilometer-scale gold anomalies, so that shows broad prospectivity. Also, base of till results at Nippes are apparently setting that target up for its first diamond drilling.
And AIDA.
And importantly for AIDA, assays from the latest drilling there are expected soon, according to reports. Those results will be a key thing to watch.
Okay, so Barcel flagship with Agnico, 100%, Oyervi with upside, massive exploration ground with hot targets like AIDA. Let's talk backing and financials now. Agnico's involvement isn't just the JV. They're a big shareholder, too.
Correct. That July 2024 transaction made Agnico Eagle a substantial shareholder. One source mentioned 13.3% of the shares, though a later presentation in Jan 2025 showed 11%. And they hold specific investor rights, provided they keep a certain ownership level, which is pretty standard for strategic investors.
What kind of rights?
The sources mentioned the right to participate in future equity financing so they can maintain their percentage. A top-up right allowing them to potentially increase their stake up to 19.9% under certain conditions, and the right to nominate someone to F&M's board, though the sources add Agnico has no current plans to do that.
So their commitment as a shareholder plus the JV funding adds another layer of strategic backing.
Exactly. And one interesting side note mentioned is Agnico's use of modern Swedish mining tech like Sandvik, Epiroc battery electric autonomous gear, could be relevant for future mining in the region.
Okay, let's look at the money side. Based on the December 31st, 2024 financials provided, how's the cash situation?
It improved quite a bit over the last fiscal year. End of 2024, they had $9.57 million in cash. That's a big jump from just $128,000 at the end of 2023. The increase was mainly driven by cash from financing activities during FY 2024. They brought in $16.35 million total.
And where did that $16 million plus come from?
It was a mix, detailed in the financials. Our private placement raised about $12.71 million gross. Then they got $2.04 million from stock options being exercised and another $2.79 million from warrants being exercised. So they successfully tapped the equity markets and saw people exercise options and warrants.
But I also noticed the operating loss went up quite a bit in 2024 versus 2023.
That's right. $10.02 million loss in FY24, compared to $1.83 million in FY23. The MD&A, part of the source material, explains this is directly tied to the increased activity level. Being an exploration stage company, they point to higher spending, especially on project development and support services that jumped from about $0.3 million to nearly $3.5 million.
Okay.
Investor relations costs also went up significantly, from $0.26 million to $1.3 million, reflecting efforts to get the story out. Professional fees, share-based payments like stock option expenses also contributed.
So the higher loss reflects more spending on exploration, admin, telling the story, not operational issues, since they aren't operating a mine yet.
Exactly, they don't have cash flow from mining. Their strategy, as outlined, is to rely on financing and, crucially, leveraging partners like Agnico who fund the JV work. That minimizes their need to raise all the capital themselves through equity. Their stated goal is managing capital to ensure they have enough funds, minimize liquidity risk, and keep going.
Which brings us right back to the risks. What are the key financial and operational risks highlighted in the sources that, people need to be aware of?
The financials and other sources are quite clear. The big one is liquidity risk, that reliance on equity financing. The risk that future funding might not be there when needed, or the terms could be bad, leading to dilution. Commodity price volatility is huge, too. Gold and silver prices swing wildly, impacting project economics and fundraising ability.
Makes sense.
Other risks noted include foreign exchange risk, though it was minimal impact in FY24 apparently. Credit risk low, interest rate risk also low. But more broadly, like any junior explorer, there are big operational challenges in mining, potential geopolitical factors, though Sweden and Finland are seen as very stable, and huge uncertainty in resource estimation. Resources are just estimates, right? Only a fraction might ever become economic reserves.
And the time it takes.
Exactly. Long development timelines mean lots of execution risk. Can they actually build it if they find something economic?
That's a critical list to keep in mind. Which leads us perfectly to that core question raised in some sources. Should investors consider this company? And the argument that maybe, just maybe, FNM is undervalued right now.
It's the heart of the investment thesis presented in some materials. Valuing explorers is tough, right? Sources mention things like net asset value, NAV multiples, but they admit market value doesn't always track NAV perfectly.
Mm.
There are so many assumptions: future metal prices, costs, discount rates like those 15, 18% IRR targets mentioned for stable places, plus qualitative stuff.
Hmm.
It's worth noting, the sources say recent analyst coverage started with price targets reportedly multiples higher than the current stock price.
Okay, so let's get specific. How do the sources make the case for potential undervaluation? What's the argument?
It mostly hinges on the perceived value of Barcel alone versus the company's market cap. One source crunched the numbers, market cap around $117 million, cash about $10 million as of Jan 1, 2025. That gives an enterprise value, EV, of about $107 million.
Okay.
The argument goes, if you assign even a fairly modest value, say $30 million, to all that 100% owned exploration ground with promising targets like Ida and Harpsund, that leaves only about $55 million in market cap, covering the value of FNM's 45% of Barcel, plus their 100% of Oyervi, plus the cash. So the implied EV just for Barcel and Oyervi, after you net out that cash again, is only around $42 million.
And the argument is that $42 million EV for their share of Barcel and Olive Oyervi is very low compared to potential comps.
Precisely. They back this up comparing it to deals for other mines or strategic land packages. Like they mentioned Alamos Gold spending $42.5 million just for grassroots ground to get 100 kilometers of strike length. Similar scale to FNM's ground, but FNM's land already has big resources and targets, plus infrastructure. The point is majors put huge strategic value on large coherent land packages in good jurisdictions for the long term. And that strategic value plus the Barcel resource in Oyervi maybe isn't fully reflected in FNM's current price.
That lays out the potential disconnect pretty clearly based on their analysis. So what catalysts do these sources point to? What could help the market, recognize this potential value?
Several key things coming up. The biggest one seems to be the planned listing on the Nasdaq First North Growth market in Sweden. The sources spend quite a bit of time explaining why this is potentially so powerful.
Why is this such a big deal?
It's about tapping into the Swedish investor market, described as one of the most stock market crazy populations globally. They overwhelmingly prefer investing in Swedish listed companies, especially those focused on Swedish projects. And right now, there's apparently very little competition from other gold explorers listed there.
So potential for lots of new buyers.
Exactly. Could lead to a large pool of net buyers for F&M shares. Plus, it means lower trading costs for Swedish investors. And a private placement for Swedish Depository Receipts, SDRs, linked to this listing, already closed after year-end, raising about CDN $1.4 million.
So the Swedish listing itself is a potential major re-rating event just by opening up a new, possibly very keen market. What else?
Exploration results, always critical for explorers. Those upcoming assays from AIDA, very near-term, key data point. Drill results from the planned work at Nippes, any more positive results from Storjektan or from Agnico's ongoing work at Barcel, all that could show resource growth, confirm new discoveries, and really move the needle on valuation.
And Agnico's own actions could be catalysts?
Absolutely. Agnico continuing to fund and work at Barcel signals ongoing commitment. If they decide in future to complete that earn for the extra 15%, or if they exercise their top-up right to buy more shares, the market would likely see those as very strong positive signals. Validation.
Right.
The idea of maybe spinning out Oyervi is also mentioned as a possible value unlock, maybe longer term. And finally, the sources expect more institutional analyst coverage to follow the recent initiations, which could broaden the investor base.
So quite a few potential milestones on the horizon that could bring more attention and maybe lead to a re-rating if things go well.
Exactly. Key things to watch for based on these sources.
Now, we've covered a lot of potential upside here based on the sources. But it's so, so important, especially with junior mining, to always remember the risks. We touched on them, but let's just hammer home the main ones you really need to consider.
Yeah, it's crucial to balance the excitement with the reality of the risks. The sources are clear. Number one, commodity price volatility, gold, silver prices. Totally unpredictable, huge impact on economics and financing. Then, exploration success uncertainty. Promising targets are great, but there's zero guarantee resources become economic reserves. Most don't.
Right, exploration is inherently high risk. High reward maybe, but high risk.
Totally. Then there's execution risk. Even if a project looks good on paper, building a mine is complex, takes years. Metallurgy, engineering, permits, labor, lots can go wrong. And finally, financing. F&M needs market funding. No guarantee it'll always be there or on good terms. That impacts everything.
Definitely things to keep front and center.
Fundamental risks for the sector.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize all this info we've pulled from the sources. First, Nordic Metals holds this big, strategic, district-scale land package in Scandinavia described as stable, increasingly pro-mining. They've got strong backing, active involvement from a major, Agnico Eagle, promising projects. The cornerstone Barcel with its big resource and upside, 100% owned Oijärvi in Finland, also with growth potential, and this huge exploration portfolio with exciting early targets like Aida, Harpsund, Nippas. They've boosted their cash position recently, funding more activity. And several upcoming catalysts highlighted the big Swedish listing exploration results viewed by some sources through this lens of potential undervaluation. But always got to balance that potential against the significant risks. Commodity prices, exploration uncertainty, execution, financing risk.
That's a good summary. A picture with both clear potential and, clear hurdles, all laid out in the material we reviewed.
So connecting back to that opening image, the Vikings, with this land position, the major partner, these key projects, is First Nordic Metals positioned to make a real mark on Europe's future gold production, like the Vikings impacted its past? What does this mix exploration potential, strong partnerships, market factors like the Swedish listing mean for their journey from explorer to maybe potentially a producer? And what key milestones should you be watching most closely based on everything these sources tell us?
Those are definitely the big questions that come out of this deep dive. And the next few months, the next year, will really start to show how that story unfolds.
Now remember, this has been a deep dive strictly into the source material provided to us by you. We are simply reporting and analyzing the information found in those sources. This is not financial advice. It's not investment advice. Investing in exploration companies, particularly in the resource sector, carries significant risks. You could lose your entire investment. Commodity prices are volatile. There's absolutely no guarantee of exploration success, project development, or that future financing will be available or on favorable terms. It is absolutely essential that you do your own thorough due diligence, understand all the risks involved, and seriously consider consulting with a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions based on this or any other information.